Over 99% of SaaS products built by solo developers fail. And yet, if you spend any time on X or indie hackers, you'll think that building a SaaS is the obvious path to wealth as a software developer because all you see are the winners posting their revenue screenshots. I spent the last 2 years helping developers transition out of their 9-to-5s, and the ones who actually make it almost never start with a SaaS. They start with something that sounds way less sexy, but something that actually works. So in this video, I'm going to break down why SaaS is failing most software engineers, why the business model that you've been told is lower leverage might actually be your fastest path to freedom, and why you need to stop feeling guilty for not building a SaaS just because you know how to code. So let me start off by explaining how most developers actually end up in a SaaS trap in the first place. You're a software engineer and you're pretty good at building things. You spent years learning how to write code, ship products, architect entire systems from nothing. And at some point, you start thinking about using these exact skills that you've built up over the years to sort of build something for yourself instead of making somebody else rich, i.e. your boss. So you go looking for ideas and you end up on X, on indie hackers, on YouTube, on Reddit forums, and a plethora of other places. And everywhere you look, people are talking about SaaS, software as a service. You hear about the recurring revenue, the you build once, you sell forever, and it really sounds like the dream. And it technically makes sense on paper. I mean, you're a developer, right? End of the day, you have the one thing that most aspiring entrepreneurs don't have, and that is the ability to actually write code and build a product yourself. You don't need to hire anybody, you don't need to raise money. You can just sit down, open up your laptop, and start coding tonight. So because of all these reasons, you'll think that you have an unfair advantage. And in a way, don't get me wrong, you most definitely do. But here's where things actually start going wrong. You pick an idea that is based on what you think would be cool to actually build, or you pick a problem that you personally have, or you pick a problem that seems like it might be useful to somebody else. So you'll spend 3 months, maybe 6 months, hell, sometimes even a year building it. You add all the features, you polish the UI, you make it picture perfect, and then you launch. And pretty much nothing happens. You barely get any paying users, if any. You'll maybe get a couple nice comments on X, but actual paying customers that are giving you monthly recurring revenue, the thing that's supposedly supposed to set you free, well, that does not materialize. And then you go back to the drawing board because now you're just confused. You understand that the product you built is good, but the market simply doesn't care about your product. And you have no idea how to actually make them care because you are, end of the day, a developer. And nobody ever taught you how to market or how to sell. So this is the part that nobody actually talks about when they're hyping up SaaS as this ultimate business model for software engineers. Understand that building the product is maybe 20%, if not less, of what it actually takes to succeed in a business. The other 80% is distribution, marketing, sales, positioning, finding the right market, talking to customers, iterating based on feedback, and doing all of that continuously for months, sometimes even years, before you start seeing actual meaningful progress. And most developers are not good at any of that. And not because they're incapable of learning, but rather because they have spent their entire careers optimizing for technical skills while pretty much ignoring everything else that contributes to the success of their business. So what ends up happening is you build a product, you sit there hoping for people to find it, you post it on X, you post it on Reddit, all these places, you submit it to Product Hunt, you maybe even decide to write a blog post about it, and when none of that works for you, you simply assume the product sucks, you must be a bad software engineer, and you go back, you start adding more features, and if that doesn't work, you scrap the entire project and you start another one, not understanding that the core of the problem was never the product, but rather everything else besides the product that was supposedly going to make it successful. And this cycle repeats over and over. You build, launch, fail, repeat. You don't actually learn where you failed. And every time you do fail, you see somebody else posting their success story and you think that you just need to find the right idea, as if the idea is the thing that's holding you back. Let me tell you once again, it is not. It is not the idea. It is the business model. SaaS is an incredibly difficult business model for a solo developer to actually succeed at. And despite what you might see online, the people who do succeed usually have some combination of either an existing audience, this refers to a lot of the indie hackers you might see, Mark Lau and all these guys, deep expertise in a very specific market, distribution advantages, or just simply years of runway to figure things out through trial and error. If you don't have any of these things, because most people might have one or two, you are basically trying to shoot at a target blindfolded and hoping that you hit a bullseye. And here's the other thing that nobody actually wants to admit about SaaS as well. The numbers that get celebrated on X are not normal outcomes. In fact, they are extreme outliers, let alone that 99.9% of software that's built doesn't actually make any money. When somebody posts a 50K MRR, what you're seeing is maybe one person out of the tens of thousands who not only had to attempt it, right, but also had to get it to succeed. So even among the people who do succeed, the timeline is almost always way longer than they make it seem. And that 1 million annually recurring revenue business potentially took them at least 5 years and 3 failed products before this one that actually worked. So that 100K launch that you might see was actually preceded by 2 years of building an audience that was gonna buy. The overnight success stories are almost always never overnight. But you don't see that context because it doesn't fit in a tweet. It doesn't fit the narrative. All you see is the outcome. And your brain just naturally assumes that outcome is achievable in a reasonable time frame if you simply just work hard enough and find a good enough idea. Once again, this is basically survivorship bias operating at full strength, and it's causing developers to make terrible decisions about how to actually spend their time and energy in trying to achieve financial and location and time freedom. Now, let me tell you about the actual business model that actually works for most developers, but nobody wants to talk about because it simply doesn't sound sexy. Service businesses. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Bigo, services don't even scale. Services trade time for money. Services aren't high leverage. You've probably heard all of this before, and it's why you initially dismissed service as a real option for you as a software engineer. But here's what I have learned. Not only from doing this exactly myself, from going to pretty much 0 to over 7 figures with my service business, but also from helping other developers actually achieve financial freedom with the same exact service-based model versus the ones who stay stuck in a SaaS hamster wheel forever. The developers who escape their 9 to 5, and just like how I escaped my 9 to 5, always build real wealth with service-based businesses. Not because services are the end goal, but because services solve all the problems that cause SaaS businesses to fail. You need to think about it this way. With a SaaS, you have to find a market, okay, validate an idea, build a product, launch it, acquire customers, retain those customers. And you have to do all of that in an incredibly long feedback loop where the failure modes are pretty much endless because at any point you have a point of failure. Whereas with a service business, all you really have to do is you go find somebody who has a problem, you offer to solve that problem, and they pay you to solve that problem. That is literally it. You can go from absolute 0 to your first paying client in a week with a service business. And the feedback loop is immediate. And you learn what people actually value by watching them hand you the money. And here's the part that most developers miss entirely. The skills that you build running a service-based business are the exact same skills you need to actually succeed at SaaS. Every single successful SaaS business started off as some type of a service. Think of Airbnb, for example, because you learn how to find customers, you learn how to sell, you learn how to position an offer, you learn what problems people will actually pay to solve. You learn how to deliver value, and you build relationships in a service-based business, all of which are directly transferable over to a SaaS. So these are the skills that will actually determine whether your SaaS even succeeds or fails, and you can learn them way faster by simply running a service-based business. Now, the question that most developers would ask at this point is, okay, Bigo, this is all great, but what service do I even offer as a software engineer? And this is where most people actually get stuck because they think they need to invent something new or find some untapped market. You don't. You need to look at what you already have. So every single one of you has what I call a unique advantage. And it usually comes from one of these three places. Of course, could come from all of them: your network, your experience, and or your location. So let me break these down for you first so you kind of understand what this even is and where the actual opportunity lies when it comes to a service-based business. Your network is everybody you have ever worked with, gone to school with, or just built relationships with over the years. It's anybody you know on a first name basis, I would say. Maybe you worked at a healthcare company for, let's say, 3 years, and now you know a dozen people in that industry who trust you. Maybe your brother-in-law runs a construction company, and you've been to enough family dinners to pretty much understand their problems to a certain extent. Maybe you're active in a community of real estate investors or fitness coaches or e-commerce sellers, and you've got that to tap into as well. These relationships are worth more than pretty much any coding skill that you can think of. These relationships will give you access to people or problems, right, who will actually take your call and consider paying you because they already trust you. Most developers completely ignore their network, or they think they don't actually have a big enough network because they think they need to sell to strangers on the internet. This is completely wrong. Your first clients will most likely come from people you already know, or people who are 1 to 2 degrees removed from people you already know. Your experience is everything that you have learned in your career. So not just the technical stuff, but rather the domain knowledge that came with it, alongside any other life experiences that you might have had. So if you spend 5 years building software for logistics companies, you will most likely understand logistics in a way that most developers don't. If you worked in fintech, you were, let's say, quant, you understand financial services better than other developers. If you worked in healthcare, you understand healthcare better than other developers. This domain knowledge is your moat. It's incredibly valuable because it means that you can speak the language of your potential clients. You understand their problems from the inside rather than trying to guess what they might actually need. And last but not least, your location. Your location matters a lot more than people might think, especially if you are not located in, let's say, a major tech hub. If you are in a smaller city or you're in a completely different country outside of the United States, there are most likely local businesses all around you that need technical help and have zero access to quality developers. So the plumber down the street, the HVAC company down the street, the accounting firm down the street, the law firm down the street, the dentist office down the street, the regional manufacturing company in your city, all of these businesses have real problems and actual real budgets, and they are not being served by the tech industry simply because every single software engineer is too busy chasing either venture-backed startups or going after bigger fish. So the developers that I have seen who succeed the fastest are the ones who find the intersection of these three things. They look at their network and ask, who do I already have access to? They look at their experience and ask, what industries do I actually understand and what is my actual moat? And then they take a look at their location and ask, what opportunities exist around me that I have been ignoring? So let me give you a real life example of what this looks like in practice, because I've seen this pattern play out dozens of times with developers that I have personally worked with. So I want to introduce you to Sandra. Sandra came to me wanting to build a SaaS. For her background, she was based in Boston and she was working as a full stack developer. And I asked her a simple question. Do you actually know anybody who would buy this specific software that you were going to make? And off the top of her head, she didn't. She had an idea based on problems that she had observed, but she had no relationship with potential buyers and no real way to actually reach them in the first place. So she was going in blind. She had no unique advantages in what she was trying to do. So instead of spending 6 months trying to build a product that might not even sell in the first place, she started offering custom development services specifically to healthcare companies. But it wasn't tailored and it wasn't wrapped as a regular development agency. Rather, it was targeted as an authoritative software consultant targeting healthcare problems. So she reached out to former colleagues, she tapped into the networks that she built over the years, and within 2 months, she had 3 paying clients paying her a hefty amount of money. And these clients taught her more about what healthcare businesses actually needed than she could have learned in her apartment trying to research the SaaS that she was building. She saw exactly which problems they were willing to pay top dollar to solve and which problems they said were important, but never actually backed it up or actually prioritized it with cash. And after about 8 months of running this service business, Sandra had a realization. and she had a crystal clear picture of what actually to build next. Not a general tool or a custom software for anybody else, but rather a very specific solution to a very specific problem that her clients had been asking for repeatedly. And that is the path that I'm trying to get at here. Services first, product second. She would have never found that product idea by sitting in her house brainstorming. The work she did on the service business allowed her to identify the problem that would make her SaaS successful, and the skills she learned would make sure that the SaaS succeeds. So this is the part that the SaaS or nothing crowd completely misses. Services and products are not opposites. They are stages. Once again, most SaaS businesses started off as services. Take a look at Netflix, Airbnb, and a plethora of other ones. Services teach you what to build. Services fund your runway. Services give you access with the customers who will eventually buy your product. So the developers who skip the service stage and go straight to the products are the ones who end up building things that nobody really wants. And the ones who do end up succeeding, as mentioned before, either already have an existing audience, either have the means to the distribution, or that has some type of inherent advantage allowing them to do that. Because most individuals optimize for leverage before they even have anything worth leveraging. So here's the thing that nobody wants to hear. You do not need a SaaS to achieve financial freedom, nor location freedom, nor time freedom. You do not need passive income. And you most certainly do not need a product that scales infinitely while you sleep. What you do need is enough money coming in that you are not relying on an employer. And a service business can get you there way faster than a SaaS can for most people, by the way. I've seen developers hit $20,000, $50,000, $100 a month in profit with service businesses. Not having a particular product, no recurring revenue in the traditional sense, just solving problems for everyday businesses and getting paid big money to actually solve those problems well. And the lifestyle that they have is exactly what they thought they needed a SaaS for. They get to work when they want, they take on the clients that they want, they have freedom and flexibility, and way more money than they would have made at the 9 to 5. So could they potentially make more money with a successful SaaS? Maybe. But the expected value calculation is not even close to actually take that risk, at least initially. So why do developers keep chasing SaaS even when the odds are basically stacked against them and only very few individuals have the natural advantages needed to start with a SaaS? Well, part of it is a survivorship bias that we talked about. You only see the winners, so you just assume that winning is common in the SaaS space. Part of it is ego as well. I mean, building a product feels way more impressive than running a service-based business. And you want to be able to say that you're a founder with a product, you have a startup, you're not just somebody who does client work and trades your time for money, right? Part of it is also the leverage narrative. You've been told over and over again that trading time for money is bad, and that leverage is good, and that SaaS represents leverage, while services represents trading time for money, and it's a little bit lower class, quote unquote. But not only is this framing completely wrong, but it also ignores the probability of success. A business model with extremely high leverage, so the SaaS, that has a low chance of working is way worse than a business model with still somewhat high leverage that has a high chance of working. And you have to factor in the likelihood of success, not necessarily just the theoretical upside, plus the vision that you have for yourself as well. What do you actually want out of this life? And by the way, I do want to point out that service businesses have a lot of leverage that most software engineers are not understanding. You can productize your services. You can hire people. You can build systems that let you deliver way more value with way less time. You can outsource everything in a service-based business and still keep making money. The ceiling is way higher than people might think. It just doesn't sound as sexy to talk about as, oh, I built a $10 million SaaS. So let me be absolutely clear about something that you as a software engineer need to understand. I'm not saying that SaaS is inherently bad. I'm not saying you should never build a product. All I'm saying is you shouldn't build a SaaS just because you're a developer and you feel guilty that you're not using your coding skills to build a SaaS. Or because you saw somebody else on X post their revenue numbers, or because people told you that it is the highest leverage thing that you could be doing. You should only build a SaaS if you have a genuine insight into a specific market, you have the distribution advantages that will get you to the next level, and you have the runway to survive the long timeline it takes to find the product market fit. So if you fulfill these conditions, then that makes SaaS a reasonable bet, but most software engineers do not. And if you're a developer sitting in your house with no audience, no savings, no deep expertise in a particular industry, and no idea what to build, starting with a service business is almost certainly not only the smarter move, but also the better move. You will learn faster, you will make more money sooner, and you will set yourself up to build a product/SaaS later down the line if that's what you still want to do. So here's what I want you to take away from this video. You do not have to feel guilty for not building a SaaS. You are not wasting your technical skills by running a service business. And you are not settling by choosing a path that's more likely to actually work. The goal was never to build a SaaS. The goal was freedom. Financial freedom, time freedom, creative freedom, and whatever version of freedom that you're chasing. So if a service-based business gets you there faster with a higher probability of success, then that is the smarter play, period. We don't have to worry about a SaaS. The developers who actually figured this out stop banging their head against the wall, trying to make a SaaS work, and start actually understanding that, okay, I can build the life that I want with a service-based business. Now look, everything I've talked about today comes from one thing: finding the right problem to solve. And that's really the real bottleneck. Not your coding skills, not your work ethic, not your intelligence. Is figuring out what problem is worth your time and who will actually pay you to solve that problem. And that's exactly what I'm going to be covering in a free live workshop that I'm holding on February 22nd at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It is called the Ideation Workshop, and it's specifically tailored and designed for software engineers who want to start a business but do not know where to begin. Either A, they have too many ideas, or B, they don't have enough ideas and they need help with them. So we're going to work through the exact frameworks for identifying your unique advantages, meaning your network, your location, and your experience, and we're gonna turn those into an actual business opportunity that you can start leveraging immediately afterwards. And this isn't going to be just theory. We are going to do the work together live, so you actually walk away with a very clear direction instead of more ideas floating around in your head. The link to register is in the description below, as well as it should be the first pinned comment. It is completely free, but spots are limited because I do want to keep it interactive. So if anything in this video resonated with you, grab a spot right now before they all fill up, because trust me, they will fill up. The last one, we had about 250 seats, which filled up in less than 7 days. And if you want to go deeper, here's what I would suggest. Book a free strategy call with me in the description below, where I will personally take a look at your skills, your specific situation, and figure out the fastest path for you to getting you out of your job and building something of your own so you too can actually achieve freedom. Once again, there's a link in the description down below to book a time, and it literally only takes about 30 seconds to grab a slot. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.